I was arranging the flowers I had bought for Ashley's wedding when the phone rang. It was the eve of the ceremony, and my heart beat with anxiety and joy. After so many years raising my daughter alone, finally I would see her happy and married. I picked up the phone expecting to hear Ashley's cheerful voice, but the tone I found froze me to the bone. "Mom, I need to talk to you urgently," she told me. Her voice was strangely tense. When I opened the door, Ashley walked in without even greeting me properly. She stood there in the living room, moving her hands, nervously avoiding my gaze. "What happened, honey? Is everything okay for tomorrow?" I asked her, sensing something strange in the air. That was when she released the words I never imagined I would hear. "Mom, you were not invited to my wedding. Richard only wants his family." She said it would be better that way. I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. For a moment, I thought I had heard wrong. "What do you mean, Ashley? I am your mom. Who else is your family, if not me?" I asked her, my voice trembling. Finally, she looked at me, but her eyes were different, distant. "Look, Mom Richard's family has social status. They are important people, businessmen, lawyers. It would be embarrassing to have you there. And you understand, right?" Every word of hers entered me as if it were piercing my soul. This was not my Ashley, the girl I raised with so much love after her dad abandoned us when she was just 5 years old. This was a stranger who spoke as if I were a burden and embarrassment. When she left in the air only the expensive perfume she now used and a feeling of emptiness I had never felt. All night long, I could not sleep a wink. I walked through the empty house, looking at the navy blue dress I had bought, especially for the wedding, still hanging in the closet with the tag on. 40 years working day and night as a seamstress, saving every penny, sacrificing everything for her. When Ashley wanted to study French, I worked entire weekends doing extra sewing jobs. When she wanted a nice prom party, I even sold my wedding ring. And now, on the most important day of her life, I was not good enough to be present. Linda, my neighbor and only close friend for more than 10 years, knocked on the door early when she saw that the lights in my house had been on all night. She saw my face swollen from crying so much and asked me what had happened. When I told her everything, Linda shook her head with indignation. "Hope you still have the papers for that house you bought her, right? The house where they are living." Linda asked me, looking me in the eyes. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in my head. But what they did not know was that everything was about to change. Saturday morning dawned cloudy, as if even the sky knew that something bad was happening in my life. I got up early, as I had always done during all these years. But this time, I was in no hurry for anything. I did not have to get ready for a wedding. I did not have to prepare the special gift I had been embroidering for months. I did not have to practice the speech I had planned to give when they asked me for a few words about my daughter. All that had come to nothing with the cold words Ashley had said to me the night before. I prepared my morning coffee as I did every morning, but the taste was bitter different. Even the simplest things had lost their meaning after what had happened. Linda returned around 9 in the morning, bringing sweet pastries from Mr. Albert's bakery. "Hope I came to keep you company on this difficult day," she told me, hugging me like the sister I never had. We sat at the kitchen table, that same table where Ashley had eaten breakfast for so many years before going to school, where we had planned her future, together, where we had dreamed of her wedding day. Now that table was a witness to my deepest pain. "I cannot believe Ashley said that," Linda murmured, shaking her head. "After everything you sacrificed for her, after raising her alone, giving her everything." I told Linda things I had never discussed with anyone, not even with her who was my confidant. I told her about the nights I stayed awake sewing until very late to be able to pay the tuition for the private school where Ashley studied. I told her about the times I ate only bread and soup so that she could have meat on her plate. I told her about the boyfriends I let go because Ashley was always my priority, because I did not want any man to make her feel that she was not important in my life. Do you remember when Ashley got sick with pneumonia at 12 years old? I asked Linda, feeling tears accumulating in my eyes. I sold my new sewing machine to be able to pay for the private doctor because at the public clinic, the waiting list was too long. Linda nodded, remembering those difficult days. Do you remember that I worked at night cleaning offices for 2 years just to buy her a computer for high school? Every memory I shared with Linda was like opening an old wound that I believed had already healed. But what hurt me the most was not having made those sacrifices. I would do them 1,000 times more if it were necessary. What hurt was that Ashley had forgotten them as easily as if none of that had mattered. Around 11 in the morning, we began to hear movement in the house next door. The musicians arriving to tune their instruments for the party. The workers from the catering company setting up tables in the garden, the coming and going of people, helping with the final preparations. Linda and I peeked discreetly through my bedroom window from where we could see perfectly the garden of the house I had bought for Ashley. It was a beautiful house with a large garden full of flowers and a wide porch, perfect for parties. I had chosen it thinking of the grandchildren who would one day fill that yard with laughter of the family gatherings we would have, of the birthdays we would celebrate there. I never imagined the day would come when I would be watching from my window a party to which I was not invited in the house that I myself had paid for. "Just look at that movement," Linda whispered, pointing toward the garden. "You can tell the party is going to be very elegant." They had put white tablecloths on all the tables, very expensive floral arrangements, lights hanging between the trees. Everything looked beautiful, just as I had dreamed my daughter's wedding would be. But I would be seeing everything from my window, like a stranger, as if I had nothing to do with the bride. At that moment, I saw Ashley come out of the house already dressed in white, radiant and beautiful. She looked happy, complete, as if nothing bad had happened, as if she had not shattered her mother's heart the day before. Richard was by her side, also very elegant in his navy blue suit. They looked perfect together, like the ideal couple I had dreamed they would form. But there was something empty in that perfection, something that I knew was missing, but that perhaps no one else would notice. Linda put her hand on my shoulder when she saw me crying again. "Hope you do not have to torture yourself watching this," she told me with affection. "Come, let's go to my house until everything passes." But I could not move from there. It was as if I needed to see with my own eyes the party from which they had excluded me, as if I needed to feel all the depth of the rejection to be able to process what had happened. When the priest arrived for the ceremony, when the live band started playing, when I saw the well-dressed guests filling the garden, I understood that this was not a nightmare from which I was going to wake up. It was my new reality. It was the mother who was not good enough to be at her own daughter's wedding. During the ceremony, which I could hear perfectly from my house, I cried in silence. I heard when the priest asked, "Who gives this woman in marriage?" And I heard the voice of Mr. Ralph, the godfather Ashley had chosen, because her own grandfather had already died. It should have been me walking her down the aisle, me giving her my blessing, me hugging her before giving her to her new husband. Instead of that, I was hidden in my house crying as if I were a stranger who had no right to be there. Linda stayed with me all afternoon, making me chamomile tea and forcing me to eat, although I was not hungry. "Hope," she said to me at one moment when the party music was already very lively, "you have something they do not know you have right." I stayed thinking about her words. It was true. I had something they did not know I had. Ashley and Richard were living in the house I had bought, the house whose papers were in my name, the house for which I was still paying the bank monthly. They had assumed it was Ashley's because I had always told them it was her house, but legally, officially, it was mine. I had done it that way because I wanted to give it to her as a wedding gift. I wanted to transfer the property in a special ceremony during the reception. I had planned a whole surprise. I had prepared an emotional speech. I had imagined Ashley's happy face when I handed her the deeds, but now that they had left me out of their life, those documents remained my protection, my only card to play in this painful situation. That night, when the party ended and the lights in the garden next door went out, I stayed awake thinking about what Linda had said. I went to my closet and took out the box where I kept all my important documents. There were the deeds to the house, the bank contract, the receipts for all the payments I had made religiously every month. Everything was in my name, Hope Hernandez. Ashley appeared on some papers as a beneficiary in case something happened to me, but not as the owner. Technically, legally, morally, that house was mine. And if Ashley had decided that I was not part of her family, perhaps it was time for her to understand what that decision really meant. In the darkness of my bedroom, with the house papers in my hands, something inside me changed forever. I was no longer the pleading mother who had been rejected. Now I was a woman who had options, who had power, who had the ability to make decisions that would change everyone's life. The next day, Sunday, Ashley and Richard went on their honeymoon to Hawaii. I saw them leave very early with their suitcases, laughing and holding hands as if nothing had happened, as if they had not left a mother with a broken heart. They did not say goodbye to me. They did not knock on my door. They did not even send me a text message to tell me they were leaving. It was as if I had ceased to exist completely for Ashley after her wedding. Linda came to visit me that afternoon and found me very different from how she had seen me the day before. "Hope you look calmer," she told me, observing me with curiosity. "Did something happen?" I smiled at her without saying anything specific. It was true, something had happened. Throughout the early morning, I had made a decision that would change everything. A decision that for the first time in many years put my own feelings and my own dignity first. I did not explain to Linda what I had decided to do, but I think she understood that something important had changed in me. I was no longer the broken woman who had been crying the day before. I was a woman who had found her strength and who was ready to use it. During the week that Ashley and Richard were on their honeymoon, I kept my normal routine so as not to arouse suspicion, but inside, I was completely transformed. It was as if I had woken up from a very long dream, where I had convinced myself that my value as a person depended on how willing I was to sacrifice myself for my daughter. I called Mike Rogers, the real estate agent who had helped me buy Ashley's house 2 years ago. "Mr. Rogers, I want to sell the house in the Oak Creek district," I told him directly. He was surprised because he knew the house was for Ashley and that she was already living there with her husband. But when I explained the situation without going into very intimate details, he understood. "Ms. Hope, legally you are well within your rights. The house is in your name, but are you sure about this?" he asked me carefully. "Completely sure, Mike. It needs to be fast and discreet." He guaranteed me that he would get a good price in a few days, as the market was very active in that area. Mike called me on Thursday, very excited. Ms. Hope, a couple of retired doctors appeared who want to buy with cash. They love the house and are offering even more than the market price. They can close the deal next week. My heart beat very fast when I heard this. It was not just an abstract idea anymore, it was something real that was happening. In a few more days, Ashley and Richard would return from their honeymoon to discover that the house where they had planned to live happily ever after was no longer theirs. But I felt no guilt or regret. I felt something I had not felt in many years. I felt that I had control over my own life, that I had the power to make decisions that benefited me, not just others. On Friday afternoon, Linda brought me gossip from the neighborhood and mentioned something that caught my attention. "You know what?" Hope, yesterday I saw Richard's mom, Mrs. Josephine, shopping at the market. She looked very happy, bragging about the wedding and the beautiful house where the kids are going to live. She even said it was perfect for the grandchildren she expects to have soon. Those words pierced me deeply. Mrs. Josephine, who had barely known Ashley for a year, was already planning the life of my future grandchildren in the house I had bought. While I, the true grandmother, the one who had raised Ashley, the one who had worked all her life to give her a better future, was excluded from all those plans. It was ironic and painful, but it also gave me more determination to go ahead with my decision. If they did not want me as family, they were not going to enjoy the benefits that my work and my sacrifices had provided either. That night, I took out all my photos of Ashley from when she was a baby until her graduation from college. In every photo, it was just the two of us against the world. Ashley in my arms when she was a newborn. Ashley taking her first steps while I waited for her with open arms. Ashley on her first day of school holding my hand tight. Ashley graduating from college with a huge smile while hugging me. In all those photos, you could see the love we had for each other. You could see the special connection we had had for so many years. But I also realized something I had never noticed before. In many of the most recent photos, Ashley no longer looked at me with the same warmth. She already looked more distant, more formal, as if being with me was an obligation rather than a pleasure. I put the photos away again and went to sleep with a strange peace in my heart. The next day, the retired doctors would come to sign the sale. Ashley and Richard would return from Hawaii on Sunday night. On Monday morning, they would discover that their perfect life had changed forever. And for the first time in many years, I would be the one in control of the situation. I would be the one making the important decisions, the one determining what was going to pass. There was something deeply liberating in that feeling, something that made me feel like I was finally recovering my dignity after years of putting it in second place for the love of my daughter. Closing my eyes that night for the first time since Ashley had told me I was not welcome at her wedding, I could sleep peacefully, knowing that very soon they would understand that decisions always have consequences. Saturday morning, the retired doctors arrived promptly at 10 to sign the sale. Mike had prepared all the papers in his office, but I preferred that they come to my house to do everything discreetly. Dr. Edward and Mrs. Amber were a very polite couple about 60 years old who had sold their house in the city to come live in a quieter place. Miss Hope, Dr. Edward said to me while reviewing the documents, "It is a very well-kept house. You can tell that the family living there has a lot of affection for it." If he knew the irony of his words. The family that lived there had cut me out of their lives as if I were a nuisance, without knowing that they were living in the house that I had bought with the sweat of my brow and the savings of a lifetime of work. When I signed the sale papers, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. It was not revenge, I felt it was self-respect. Throughout my adult life, I had been the mother who gave everything, who sacrificed, without questioning, who always put her daughter first. Now, for the first time in decades, I was putting myself first. Mike handed me the check for the sale. It was more money than I ever imagined having together enough to restart with dignity anywhere I wanted. "Miss Hope," Mike said to me with respect, "I hope you know that you have made a very brave decision. It is not easy to change your life at 68 years old." I smiled and replied that sometimes the most difficult changes are the most necessary. After the buyers and Mike left, I stayed alone in my house looking at the check that represented my new freedom. Linda knocked on the door around 1 in the afternoon bringing a pot roast she had prepared to share with me. "Hope I see you different," she told me, observing me with curiosity while serving the food. "It is as if you had made a very important decision." I smiled at her without explaining anything specific. It was true I had made the most important decision of my adult life, but it was not yet the time to tell anyone. First, I had to finish what I had started. I had to close this chapter of my life before starting the next. That afternoon, I dedicated myself to remembering. I took out all the boxes of photos I had stored in the closet and sat at the dining table to relive 40 years of life. There were the photos of when Ashley was a baby, so tiny, so helpless, depending completely on me for everything. Her dad, Ray, had barely lasted 5 years with us before leaving with another woman, leaving me alone with a small child and a pile of debts. I remembered the nights I stayed awake wondering if I was going to be able to handle everything. If I was going to manage to give Ashley the life she deserved without having a man to help us. In one photo, Ashley was about 7 years old and was smiling without front teeth, hugging a teddy bear that I had bought for her after working overtime for a month. I remembered that day perfectly. She had seen the bear in the window of a toy store and had told me it was the most beautiful in the world. I knew I did not have money to buy it for her, but I also knew that my daughter had already lost her dad, and I did not want her to lose her childhood dreams, too. I worked cleaning offices after my normal seamstress job until I gathered enough money. When I took the bear home, Ashley cried with happiness and told me that I was the best mom in the world. At that moment, I felt that all my sacrifices were worth it. There was another photo of when Ashley turned 16. We had saved for 2 years to be able to throw her a nice sweet 16 party in the neighborhood event hall. It wasn't the most luxurious party, but it was made with a lot of love. Ashley looked beautiful in her pink dress, which I had sewn myself working on it during the nights after she went to sleep. That night when we danced together, she whispered in my ear, "Mom, thanks for giving me everything, even though we don't have much money. When I grow up, I am going to give you everything you deserve." I kept those words in my heart for years, believing that one day they would come true. Now I knew that Ashley had forgotten that promise as completely as she had forgotten everything we had lived together. Linda returned the next day, Sunday, with a worried expression on her face. Hope I was asking discreetly at the market, and they told me that Ashley and Richard returned tonight from Hawaii. People are very excited to see them. They say they looked very happy in the photos they uploaded to Facebook. I felt a knot in my stomach hearing that. In a few hours, Ashley would be back in the house that was no longer hers, having no idea what had happened during her absence. "Linda," I told her, "I want you to give this to Ashley." I handed her a sealed envelope that I had prepared during the night. "But don't give it to her until 10 in the morning, okay?" Linda took the envelope, carefully looking at me with concern. "Hope, what is going to happen tomorrow?" I explained everything I had done during the week. The sale of the house, the new owners who would take possession on Monday morning, my decision to leave town to start a new life. Linda was left speechless for several minutes, processing all the information. "Oh, Hope," she finally told me, "I understand why you did it, but it is going to be very hard for Ashley when she realizes." I replied that Ashley had had the opportunity to treat me with respect and love, but had chosen cruelty and contempt. Now she would have to live with the consequences of her decisions. That night, I packed my most important things in 2 large suitcases. I was not going to take much, just the necessary clothes, some photos that really mattered to me, my personal documents, and the small sewing machine that had been my work companion for so many years. Everything else, the furniture, the appliances, the memories that had filled that house for decades, would stay behind. It was time to travel light to start over without the weight of the past on top. I had bought a bus ticket to Chicago where my cousin Connie lived. She had a small but cozy house and had told me on the phone that I could stay with her as long as I needed while I decided what to do with my new life. Monday at dawn at 5 in the morning, I called a taxi to take me to the bus terminal. Before leaving, I left a note for Linda where I thanked her for all the years of sincere friendship and asked her to take care of the plants in my garden until someone else took charge of the house. I also left her the keys to my house with instructions to give them to Mr. Martinez, the lawyer who would take charge of selling my property and sending me the money to Chicago. I did not want to stay to see the faces of Ashley and Richard when they discovered what had happened. I had already seen enough pain and disappointment in my life. I did not need to see more. The bus trip to Chicago lasted 4 hours. Throughout the journey, I looked out the window, watching the landscape pass by, the landscape I had known all my life, saying goodbye in silence, to every town, every hill, every memory left behind. I did not feel sadness. I felt a strange sensation of freedom that I had not experienced since I was very young, before getting married, before having Ashley, before my life became completely dedicated to caring and sacrificing for others. For the first time in decades, I did not know exactly what was going to happen in my future, but I knew that what happened would be my decision, not someone else's imposition. Connie was waiting for me at the terminal with a warm smile and a hug that I needed more than I imagined. "Cousin," she told me while carrying one of my suitcases, "welcome to your new life." On the way to her house, I told her everything that had happened, from the wedding where I was not invited to the sale of the house and my decision to leave. Connie listened to me without judging me, nodding with understanding. "Hope," she told me when I finished telling her everything, "you did the right thing. A mother can give everything for her children, but she cannot allow them to humiliate and despise her. There are limits that no one has the right to cross, not even children." Connie's house was small but very pretty, with a patio full of pots with flowers of all colors. She gave me the guest room, which had a window facing the patio and a comfortable bed with hand-knitted quilts. "This is your space, cousin," she told me with affection. "Stay as long as you need. At the 65 years I have, I really like having company." That first night in Chicago, I went to bed early but could not sleep immediately. I was thinking about Ashley, imagining her face when Linda handed her the letter, imagining her desperation when she realized she had lost not only the house, but also her mother. The envelope I had left with Linda contained only a very simple letter. "Ashley, the house was sold. The new owners take possession today, Monday. You made your decision at your wedding. I made mine now. Respectfully, Hope Hernandez." I did not put dramatic explanations. I did not apologize. I did not leave a phone number for contact. It was just the necessary information transmitted with the same coldness that Ashley had used with me about her wedding. If she could be cold and calculating, I could be too. The difference is that I had justified reasons for my coldness, while hers had been pure cruelty. Linda called me exactly a week after my departure to tell me how the delivery of the letter had been. "Hope I had never seen Ashley like that," Linda told me on the phone. She read the letter 3 times, turned white as paper started trembling. Then she ran toward the house and met the new owners, who were already measuring the bedrooms for their furniture. It was total desperation. She told me that Ashley had started crying on the sidewalk, that Richard had arrived running from work when she called him, that they had spent the whole afternoon knocking on neighborhood doors, asking if anyone knew where I was. "Ashley came to my house like 5 times that day," Linda continued. "She asked me again and again if I knew anything, if you had told me anything, if I had your phone or your address. I told her I knew nothing, as you had asked me." Linda told me that Richard had tried to contact Mike. Rogers had threatened with lawsuits, had spoken of irregularities in the sale, but Mike had been firm. Attorney Richard Mrs. Hope Hernandez was the only legal owner of the property. The sale was completely legitimate and regular. Here are all the documents. There was nothing they could do legally. The house was mine, I had the right to sell it, and everything had been done according to the law. Linda continued telling me the details of that terrible week for Ashley and Richard. They had to go live at Richard's parents' house while looking for something to rent. Ashley looked like a zombie, did not talk to anyone, did not leave the house for anything. The people of the neighborhood started asking questions about what had happened, but no one understood well. She told me that Richard's mom, Mrs. Josephine, was furious because she had been bragging to all her friends about the beautiful house where her children were going to live. And now she had to explain why they were living in her house like newlyweds without independence. What impressed me the most, Linda told me, was a conversation I had with Ashley on Friday of that week. She came to my house very late, around 9 at night. She looked terrible with deep dark circles, very skinny. She said to me, "Linda, I know my mom told you where she was going. Please, I need to talk to her. I need to explain to her that everything was a misunderstanding." I answered that I knew nothing. But Ashley kept insisting. "It was not my intention to hurt her so much," she was saying. "I just wanted an elegant wedding. I didn't think she was going to take things so seriously." Those words pierced me deeply. Ashley still did not understand the magnitude of what she had done. for her destroying her mother's heart had been something unimportant, a misunderstanding that could be fixed with an explanation. During those first weeks in Chicago, I established a completely new routine. I got up early and helped Connie with the housework. Then we went out to walk in the park that was close to her house. We talked with the neighbors we met. We bought fresh vegetables at the local market. It was a simple life, but full of small pleasures I had forgotten existed. There was no tension. There was no walking on tiptoes so as not to bother anyone. There were no reproachful looks nor hurtful comments. It was the peace I had not felt in years. Connie had a group of friends who gathered every Wednesday to knit and talk. She invited me to join them, and I discovered that there was a whole world of women my age who had gone through similar experiences. Mrs. Susan had had problems with a daughter who treated her like a free maid. Mrs. Renee had lived years being ignored by her children until she decided to go live alone. Mrs. Letty had been humiliated at her grandson's birthday when her daughter-in-law told her she looked too country for the party. Everyone understood perfectly what had happened to me. Everyone had felt that same deep disappointment of discovering that the children to whom they had dedicated their lives saw them as burdens instead of blessings. The problem, Mrs. Susan explained to me one afternoon while we were knitting scarves for winter, is that we taught our children that we were less important than them. We always put ourselves last in priorities. We always said, "my children first," until they believed that we really were worth less. Her words made me reflect a lot. It was true throughout Ashley's life I had taught her that she was more important than me, that her needs came before mine, that my happiness depended on hers. Without realizing it, I had taught her not to value me, to see me as someone who existed solely to serve her. A month after my arrival in Chicago, Linda called me again with news. "Hope Ashley doesn't ask for you as much anymore. I think she finally understood that you are not coming back." She told me that Ashley had found a job in a clothing store to help with expenses, that Richard was working overtime to be able to rent a small apartment, that they had to cancel the anniversary trip they had planned because they had no money. "They look tired, stressed," Linda told me. "I think they never imagined how difficult life is when you don't have someone who solves all your problems." Linda also told me something that surprised me a lot. "You know what, Hope? The other day I saw Ashley at the market, and when she saw me, she approached to talk to me. She told me something that stuck with me. Linda, I never realized everything my mom did for me until she was gone. Now that I have to wash, cook, clean, work, and also deal with money problems, I understand why she always looked so tired." I told her that maybe it was time for her to look to ask for your forgiveness, but she answered that it was already too late, that she knew she had lost the right to your love. Those words caused me a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I was glad that Ashley was finally understanding the value of everything I had done for her for years, but it also hurt me that she had needed to lose me to realize it. It was as if my value as a mother had only become visible when I was no longer available to her. During that night, I stayed awake thinking about whether Ashley had really learned something from this experience, or if she was just feeling sorry for herself, because now she had to work and take responsibility for her own life like any normal adult. 2 months after my departure, I took an important decision. With the money from the sale of Ashley's house and the money from the sale of my original house, I had enough to buy a small house in Chicago and live comfortably the rest of my years. I found a lovely house on a quiet street with 2 bedrooms, a small garden, perfect for planting flowers, and kind neighbors who welcomed me as part of the community from the first day. For the first time in my life, I was going to have a house that would be completely mine, where no one was going to treat me like an undesirable visitor, where my decisions would be respected because it was my space, my refuge, my home. The day I signed the purchase of my new house, Connie accompanied me to celebrate. "Cousin," she told me while we toasted with iced tea in my new living room, "this is what you deserved for many years, a home of your own tranquility, respect." She was right. It was exactly what I deserved. During decades, I had lived to make others happy. I had put my own needs at the bottom of the list. I had accepted being treated as less important. Now at 68 years old, finally, I was learning to treat myself with the love and respect that I had always given so generously to others. That night, on my first night in my new house, I sat on the patio, watching the stars and thinking about Ashley. I wondered if she was thinking about me, too, if she had really learned from her mistakes, if someday she would understand that what had happened was not revenge, but justice. I felt no resentment toward her. I had reached a place of peace where I could remember the good years we had lived together without the betrayal that came later hurting me. Ashley would always be my daughter, but now I knew that a mother's love did not mean allowing myself to be mistreated without consequences. 3 months after moving to Chicago, my life had found a completely different and serene rhythm. Every morning I woke up to the singing of birds and prepared my morning coffee without haste, with no one rushing me or making me feel like a burden. I took care of my small garden in the new house. I planted red roses and white carnations, flowers that I always adored but never had time to cultivate properly. The neighbors on the street were gentle and respectful. They called me Miss Hope with genuine affection. They did not know my past history. They did not know about the daughter who had rejected me. For them, I was simply a quiet lady who liked to read on the patio and occasionally made homemade cookies to share on special dates. One rainy afternoon, while I was organizing some books I had bought at the local flea market, the doorbell rang. It was the mailman with a certified package. I immediately recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was from Ashley. She had discovered my address through Connie, whom she had contacted after much searching. Inside was a long handwritten letter and some photos. They were photos of her wedding that I had not seen. Ashley radiant cutting the cake, Ashley dancing, Ashley smiling, surrounded by elegantly dressed people. In the letter, she wrote things like, "Mom, I made the biggest mistake of my life. The wedding was not the same without you. I realize now how much you did for me, and please give me a chance to fix this." I read everything calmly. I observed each photo for a long time. In all the images, Ashley really looked happy and fulfilled. But I also noticed something that caught my attention. In no photo did she look sad or worried about my absence. At no time during her wedding had she shown signs of missing me or feeling bad about excluding me. Her regret had come only after the consequences affected her directly, only when she realized what she had lost in practical terms. It was not regret for having hurt me. It was self-pity for having lost the benefits of having me in her life. I sat in the armchair in the living room with a hot chamomile tea and stayed thinking for hours. Then I took a small shoebox, put the photos and the letter inside, and stored it in the bedroom closet. It was not anger I felt. It was a serene acceptance that some paths, once chosen, have no return. Ashley had made her decision consciously on the most important day of her life. I had made mine with the same awareness. I did not send a reply, I did not call, I did not seek contact. I simply continued living my new life, watering my flowers, reading my books, talking with neighbors about simple and daily matters. 2 weeks after receiving Ashley's letter, Linda called me with news that surprised me. Hope Ashley came to see me again. She looked very different. Thinner, with dark circles, but also more, I don't know how to explain it, more mature, maybe. Linda told me that Ashley had asked her directly if I had answered her letter. I told her I knew nothing about you since you left, as you had asked me. But Hope, I think she's finally understanding the magnitude of what she did. Linda explained to me that Ashley had been working double shifts at the clothing store to help pay the rent for a small apartment they had obtained in a not very good area of our town. Do you know what she told me that impacted me the most? Linda continued. She told me, "Linda, I never thought my mom was so strong. I always saw her as someone who needed me to take care of her when she was old. I never imagined she could take such drastic decisions and completely change her life at 68 years old." I think Ashley always underestimated you, Hope. She saw you as a helpless little old lady who was going to depend on her not as the independent and brave woman you really are. Those words made me reflect deeply. It was true. Ashley had never seen me as a complete person with my own desires, dreams, and capabilities. For her, I was just Mom, a function, not a woman, with my own life and dignity. During those months in Chicago, I had been making decisions I had never dared to make before. I enrolled in a watercolor painting workshop at the community center. I discovered I had a natural ability to capture the colors of the sunset and the textures of the flowers in my garden. The teacher, Mrs. Higgins, encouraged me to participate in a small exhibition they organized every year to show the students' work. Ms. Hope, she told me one day while reviewing my painting of some sunflowers, "You have a special talent for finding beauty in simple things. Your paintings transmit a lot of peace." It was the first time in decades that someone recognized a talent of mine that had nothing to do with being a mother or sacrificing for others. I also joined the reading group organized by the public library. Every 2 weeks we gathered to discuss different books, novels, biographies, poetry books. I discovered that I had my own interesting opinions on the topics we read, that I could participate in intelligent debates, that my perspective was valued by the other ladies in the group. Ms. Hope, that was how they called me, with genuine respect, was not just the woman who had raised children or the one who made good cookies. She was a complete person with deep thoughts, artistic creativity, and wisdom gained through years of experience. One day, while I was painting on my patio, my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, arrived with an unexpected proposal. "Ms. Hope, my daughter who lives in Texas, wants to learn to sew to make clothes for her children. Do you think you could teach her by video call? She would pay you well for the classes." It was an idea that had never occurred to me, using my seamstress skills to teach not just to work. I accepted the proposal, and soon I had 3 regular students taking classes with me from different cities in the United States. They were young women who lived far from their families and wanted to keep alive the sewing traditions they had learned from their grandmothers. The internet classes gave me not only additional income, but also a completely new sense of purpose. My students called me Teacher Hope and told me about their lives. They asked me for advice not only on sewing, but on how to raise their children, how to maintain family traditions, how to face the loneliness of being far from home. I realized I had a lot of wisdom to share, a lot of valuable experience I had accumulated during years of solving problems and facing challenges. For the first time in my life, I felt valued for who I was not, for what I could give or sacrifice for others. 6 months after moving to Chicago, Linda called me with news that moved me deeply. "Hope I have something to tell you about Ashley that I think will interest you." She told me that Ashley had started visiting Mrs. Margaret regularly, an elderly lady who lived alone in the neighborhood and who had been my friend for years. Ashley goes every week to help her with shopping, to clean her house, to keep her company. When I asked her why she did it, she told me something very interesting. "Linda, my mom always taught me to help older people, but I never listened to her. Now I understand that caring for the elderly is a blessing, not a burden." Linda continued telling me the details of this new facet of Ashley that I had never seen before. Last week, Ashley organized a collection at her work to buy a new stove for Mrs. Margaret. This week, she convinced Richard to fix the roof that was leaking in her house for free. It is as if she had finally understood the value of caring for others without expecting anything in return. These news caused me very contradictory feelings. I was glad that Ashley was learning to value older people and treat them with respect. But it also hurt me that she had needed to lose me to learn these basic lessons of humanity and compassion. During that time, I also began receiving letters from Ashley more frequently. They were not dramatic letters asking for forgiveness. They were letters where she told me about her daily life, about the books she was reading, about the things she was learning at her work. It was as if she were trying to show me that she was becoming a different person, more mature, more aware of others' needs. In one letter, she wrote, "Mom, yesterday I saw a lady on the bus who reminded me a lot of you. She was carrying heavy bags, and no one offered her help. I got up and helped her carry her things to her stop. When she thanked me, she told me that her daughter lived far away and that she rarely received help from strangers. I thought about all the times you carried my heavy things, and I felt very ashamed to have treated you like a burden when the only thing you did was love me. These letters arrived every 2 weeks approximately, and although I read them all, I still did not answer any. It was not out of resentment, it was because I had learned that words without actions do not mean much, and that true change is demonstrated over time, not with promises written on paper. If Ashley had really changed, she would demonstrate it with her actions over months and years, not with emotional letters written in a moment of guilt. I kept all her letters in the same box, where I had put her wedding photos, not to torture myself reading them again and again, but to remind myself that I had made the right decision by walking away from a situation that hurt me. A year after my departure from town, I had a very important conversation with Mrs. Susan in our knitting group. She had been observing me for months, and that day she decided to speak to me directly. "Hope I have seen you change a lot since you arrived here. When Connie brought you for the first time, the pain of a betrayed mother could be seen in your eyes. Now I see in you the strength of a woman who has found herself." She asked me if I ever thought about reconciling with Ashley, if I believed that one day we could have a mother and daughter relationship again. "Mrs. Susan," I replied, after carefully thinking about my words, "I have learned that a mother's love does not mean allowing yourself to be mistreated without consequences. Ashley had the opportunity to treat me with respect and love at the most important moment of her life, and she chose cruelty and contempt. If she has really changed, as her recent actions seem to indicate, I am happy for her and for the people who will benefit from her new attitude. But that does not mean I have the obligation to expose myself again to the risk of being hurt." Mrs. Susan nodded with understanding. "Sometimes," she told me, "the best way to love our children is to teach them that actions have permanent consequences." During the autumn of that year, I decided to take one more step in my new independence. With the money I had saved from the online sewing classes and what was left from the sale of the houses, I bought an industrial sewing machine and converted one of the bedrooms of my house into a small workshop. I began making school uniforms for the local school's communion dresses, for families who could not pay the high prices of boutiques and work clothes, for ladies who needed cheap but well-made uniforms. My business grew quickly by word of mouth. People appreciated that my prices were fair and that my work was of excellent quality. Ms. Hope. Mrs. Amber would tell me when she came to pick up her grandchildren's uniforms, "You have golden hands for sewing. My grandchildren look very elegant in the uniforms you make them." The recognition of my work gave me a deep satisfaction that I had not felt in years. It was my business, my decisions, my schedule, my prices. I did not depend on anyone else for my livelihood. I did not have to ask for permission to make decisions. I did not have to justify my expenses or my life choices. I was economically independent for the first time since I got married so many decades ago. On Christmas Eve of that year, I received a different letter from Ashley. It was shorter than the previous ones, but deeper. It said, "Mom, tomorrow is Christmas, and for the first time in my life, I will not be with you on this special date. I have been remembering all the Christmases of my childhood when you worked extra to be able to buy me gifts when you made hot cider and dinner, so that we would have a nice celebration even if we didn't have much money. I especially remembered the Christmas when I was 10 years old and I got very sick. You stayed awake all night taking care of me, applying cold compresses, giving me medicine every 2 hours. When I woke up on Christmas morning and saw that you had wrapped my gifts, even though you had spent the night awake taking care of me, I understood that I had the best mom in the world. I don't know why I forgot that lesson when I grew up. I don't know why I allowed other people to make me believe that you were less important. I only know that I was a fool who traded gold for sequins. I hope that wherever you are, you have a Christmas full of peace and love. I love you, even if I no longer have the right to tell you." That letter made me cry for the first time in months. They were not tears of pain like the ones I had shed the previous year. They were tears of deep sadness for what had been lost for time, that could not be recovered for the mother-daughter relationship that had ended in such an unnecessary and painful way. But there was also some relief in those tears. The relief of knowing that Ashley finally understood the magnitude of what she had lost, that she finally valued what we had had together for so many years. It did not change my decision to keep my distance, but it gave me a sense of closure I did not know I needed. That Christmas Eve I spent with Connie and her neighbors at a community dinner they organized in Mrs. Renee's patio. There was pot roast pies, hot cider guitar music, and cheerful conversations that lasted until very late. I felt loved and valued by people who knew me as Hope, not as Ashley's mom or the lady who sacrificed everything for her daughter. It was a new identity that I had built based on who I really was, not on the functions I had fulfilled for others. For the first time in decades, a Christmas felt like a genuine celebration of joy, not a heavy obligation to make others happy at the cost of my own happiness. At the end of that night, while helping to clean the dishes and putting away the leftovers, Mrs. Letty told me something that stayed with me forever. "Hope I see you so at peace now. It is as if you had found your place in the world." She was right. I had found my place. It was not the place I had planned to have at 68 years old. It was not the life I had dreamed of when Ashley was little. But it was a place where I was respected, where my opinions mattered, where I could make decisions without asking for permission, where I could be myself without having to justify my existence. It was the place where I had learned that self-love is not selfishness. It is the necessary foundation to be able to love others in a healthy way and without resentment. 2 full years had passed since I left the town where Ashley got married without me. My life in Chicago had consolidated in a way I never imagined possible at 68 years old. My small sewing workshop had become a respected business in the neighborhood. I had regular clients who came from other districts because they knew my work was quality and my prices fair. The internet sewing classes had grown so much that now I had a waiting list of ladies who wanted to learn from the United States, Canada, and even England. I was an economically independent woman, socially active, and emotionally at peace. I had found my place in the world without needing to sacrifice my dignity for anyone's love. One March morning, while I was watering my roses that had already grown beautiful and lush in the garden, Linda called me with news I did not expect. "Hope, I have to tell you something very important. Ashley is pregnant." The news came to me like a wave of contradictory emotions. I was going to be a grandmother. After so many years waiting for this moment, it was finally happening, but now that I was no longer part of Ashley's life. "How is she?" I asked, unable to prevent my maternal instinct from activating automatically. "She's physically fine," Linda replied carefully, "but emotionally she looks very affected. I think the pregnancy has made her think a lot about you, about how her own childhood was about the kind of mother she wants to be." Linda told me that Ashley had been asking for me more frequently lately, especially since she confirmed her pregnancy. She asks me things like, if you were afraid when you were pregnant with her, if you felt alone when her dad abandoned you. How did you manage to raise her being so young? It is as if she were finally trying to understand everything you went through for her. She also told me that Ashley had been visiting Mrs. Margaret more regularly, helping her not only with shopping and cleaning, but also asking her for advice on how to care for babies, as if she were trying to learn from a substitute grandmother the things she should have learned from me. "There is something else I think you should know," Linda continued with a more serious voice. "Richard lost his job at the law firm. Apparently, there were problems with an important case, and they fired him. Ashley is now working full-time at the store, and he is looking for work, but it is difficult to get something well-paid in town. They are going through very difficult economic times." The irony of the situation did not escape me. the same important and elegant men who had been the reason why I was not invited to the wedding, Richard's family, with their supposed superior social position, apparently had not been able to help them in these difficult moments. Superficial relationships based on appearances do not offer the solid support that a true family based on genuine love gives. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Ashley that was different from all the previous ones. It did not speak of regret or forgiveness. It spoke of her pregnancy and her fears as a future mother. "Mom," she wrote, "I am 4 months along, and every day that passes, I realize more how brave you were when you had me. The doctor explained to me all the care I need to have all the vitamins I must take, all the medical checkups that are necessary. When I think that you went through all this alone without a family to support you with very little money and still managed to have me born healthy and strong, I feel very small compared to you. Now, I understand why you always told me that children are a blessing, because you really have to love a lot to be willing to go through everything that bringing a life into the world means." The letter continued with reflections that moved me deeply. "I have been reading books on parenting, and they all talk about the importance of children growing up feeling loved and valued. I am very afraid of not being able to love my baby in the unconditional way you loved me. I'm afraid of repeating the mistakes I made with you, but now being the mother, how am I supposed to teach my child to value their family if I myself did not know how to value mine?" These words showed me that Ashley was finally understanding the true dimension of what it means to be a mother, not just the pretty part of having a baby, but the immense responsibility of raising a complete human being. Linda kept keeping me informed of the changes in Ashley's life during her pregnancy. She told me that she had stopped hanging out with the superficial friends she had met through Richard and now spent more time with older ladies in the neighborhood seeking advice on motherhood and family life. It is as if she understood that true wisdom comes from women who have lived more and have gone through real experiences, not from those who only talk about expensive brands and social gossip, Linda explained to me. She also told me that Ashley had started saving obsessively every penny she earned, not to buy herself expensive clothes or go out to elegant restaurants, but to prepare economically for the baby's arrival. Do you know what she told me last week that impacted me a lot? Linda asked me during one of our phone conversations. She told me, "Linda, now I understand why my mom never bought herself new clothes or never went out to have fun. Every dollar she didn't spend on herself, she was saving for me for my education for my future. And I grew up believing it was normal for a mother to sacrifice so much. I never understood that it was a huge gift she was giving me." I think Ashley is finally valuing all your sacrifices, Hope. It's a pity she needed to be in your place to understand it. During that time, I was going through my own process of reflection on motherhood. The group of ladies with whom I knitted on Wednesdays had decided to make blankets and baby clothes to donate to needy families. And while I knitted small yellow and white hats, I could not help but think about the baby that would arrive my grandson or granddaughter, who would grow up without knowing me. It was a deep sadness, but different from the one I had felt 2 years ago. It was not the desperate sadness of betrayal and abandonment, but the serene sadness of a lost opportunity that could no longer be recovered. I had made peace with my decisions and knew they had been the right ones, but that did not take away the natural melancholy of knowing that there would be a new life in my family growing up without my presence. Mrs. Susan, who had become my closest confidant after Connie observed me one afternoon, while I worked on a particularly delicate blanket with very fine stitches. "Hope is that blanket for your grandchild on the way?" she asked me with her usual insight. I had not told anyone in the group about Ashley's pregnancy, but Mrs. Susan had that ability to read between the lines and understand things without being explained directly. "Yes," I replied simply, "although she will probably never use it." She nodded with understanding. Sometimes we do things for love even if we know that love is not going to reach its destination. It is a way to honor the feeling even if the relationship is broken. 6 months into Ashley's pregnancy, Linda called me urgently one morning. "Hope Ashley is in the hospital. She had complications, and the baby was born premature. It's a little girl. She is in an incubator, but the doctors say she is going to be fine." My heart raced immediately. All my maternal instincts and now grandmother instincts activated automatically. How is Ashley? Does she need anything? The hospital expenses. I began to ask before realizing what I was doing. Linda noticed my reaction. "Hope it shows that even though you have taken distance, you still love your family. That speaks very well of you as a person. Ashley is physically fine," Linda continued, "but emotionally she is very affected. During all the labor she was asking for you saying she needed her mom. Richard told me that when they put the baby in her arms for the first time, the only thing she said was, 'I wish my mom were here to meet you.' The doctors told them that the baby is going to be fine, but she is going to need special care for the first few weeks." Linda paused before continuing. "Hope I think this moment has made Ashley understand definitively what family really means. When you are going through something so important and difficult, social appearances and superficial friends do not matter at all. You only want your true family by your side." I asked Linda what the baby's name was, and she replied that she was named Helen Hope. Ashley had put my name as her daughter's middle name. It was a symbolic gesture that moved me deeply, but that also generated very complex feelings in me. On one hand, it was nice to know that Ashley honored me that way, and that she wanted her daughter to carry my name. On the other hand, it hurt me that it was only a symbolic gesture. My name on the birth certificate of a girl who would probably grow up without knowing the grandmother whose name she bears. It was beautiful and sad, at the same time, like many things in life that do not turn out as we had planned. The following weeks were very difficult for Ashley and Richard. Linda kept me informed of the situation. The baby was progressing well in the incubator, but the medical expenses were very high, and they did not have private health insurance. Social Security covered the basics, but the special care Helen needed required expensive medicines and treatments. Ashley had to take unpaid leave from work to be with the baby, and Richard still hadn't found a stable job. "Hope," Linda told me with concern, "I think they are in a very complicated economic situation. I have seen Ashley in the hospital with the same clothes for several days in a row, and when I offered her money to buy something to eat, she started crying and told me she couldn't accept help from anyone else because they already owed money to too many people." During that time, I struggled a lot internally with the decision to help or not to help. I had enough money saved to cover all of Helen's medical expenses without it affecting me financially. My sewing business was going very well. The online classes generated constant income, and I had achieved economic stability that allowed me to help without sacrificing my own security. But I also knew that helping financially could be interpreted as an invitation to restore the relationship, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. It was one of the most difficult decisions I had had to make in these years of independence. Finally, I made a decision that allowed me to help without compromising my position. I asked Linda to go to the hospital and anonymously pay all of Helen's pending medical expenses, telling the administrators that it was a donation from a person who preferred to keep their identity private. Tell them it is someone who believes that all children deserve to have the best medical care available, regardless of their parents' economic situation. I told Linda it was a way to take care of my granddaughter without exposing my feelings or creating expectations of reconciliation that perhaps I was not ready to fulfill. Linda fulfilled my request and called me that same afternoon to tell me the reaction. Hope, when they told Ashley that someone had paid all the outstanding bills, she started crying with relief. She asked the administrator again and again who it had been, but he kept the confidentiality as you had asked. Ashley told me later that she felt it had been a miracle that just when she didn't know how they were going to be able to continue paying for the treatments, this anonymous angel appeared. Linda paused. "I think deep down she suspects it was you, Hope. She asked me if I knew anything, but I told her I had no idea, as you had asked me. A week later, Helen was discharged from the hospital. Linda sent me a photo by message that she had taken discreetly. Ashley holding her baby for the first time outside the hospital, with a smile of happiness mixed with fatigue, and Richard by her side, carrying a small bag with the few things they had to receive their daughter at home. It was a beautiful image, but one that also broke my heart. It was the moment every grandmother dreams of living, meeting her granddaughter, holding her, being part of those first very important days. But I was living that moment from a distance, like an anonymous observer of my own family's happiness. That night, I sat on my patio under the stars with a cup of hot tea and reflected on everything that had happened in these 2 years. Ashley had changed. That was evident by her actions, by how she had matured during the pregnancy, by how she had learned to value the really important things in life. But the change had come after the damage, after the hurtful words had been said, after the trust had been broken. It was like a beautiful vase that breaks. You can glue it and it can be useful again, but the lines where it broke will always be visible. Some wounds heal but leave permanent scars that forever change the shape of the object that carries them. I felt no resentment toward Ashley. I had reached a place of genuine forgiveness where I could recognize that she had made terrible mistakes, but that she had also learned from them. However, forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and forgiveness does not mean that consequences disappear. Ashley had learned valuable lessons about the value of family, about the real meaning of maternal sacrifice, about the importance of treating others with respect and dignity. But she had learned those lessons at the cost of losing the relationship with her mother, and that was a consequence she would have to carry for the rest of her life. Some decisions cannot be undone, some words cannot be withdrawn, and some opportunities do not present themselves again. That was the hardest lesson, but the most important one that Ashley had had to learn, and she had had to learn it in the most painful way possible. As I looked at the stars that night, I thought about Helen, my granddaughter, who would carry my name, but who would grow up without knowing me. I silently wished her a life full of love, a mother who valued her every day, a family that treated her like the blessing she really was. And I promised myself that if one day, when Helen was older and could understand the complexities of family relationships, she wanted to meet the grandmother whose name she bore, I would be willing to tell her our story. Not to justify myself or to make her mother look bad, but to teach her that true love sometimes requires making difficult decisions to protect our own dignity and well-being. 5 years have passed since I left my hometown and since Helen was born. My life in Chicago has become full in ways I never imagined when I was young. My sewing workshop is now known in several neighborhoods. My internet classes have students in 12 different countries, and my garden has become a small paradise of flowers that I tend every morning with patience and love. I have learned to be happy with myself, to value my own company, to make decisions thinking solely of my well-being and what is right for my life. Linda still calls me every month to keep me up to date on Ashley and Helen, although no longer with the dramatic frequency of the first years. Ashley found a job as a secretary in a government office, a stable though modest job. Richard finally got a job in a small firm, earning much less than he earned before, but enough to support his family. They live in a small but clean apartment. They have learned to manage their money with care, and for the first time in their lives, they are living without depending on anyone else's financial help. Helen is already 5 years old and is a very intelligent girl, Linda tells me in our last conversation. She looks a lot like Ashley when she was little, but she has something in her gaze that reminds me of you, that quiet determination. Linda tells me that Helen asks for me occasionally, especially when she hears her full name in formal situations. "Mommy, why did you name me Hope if I don't know any hope?" she asks Ashley. And Ashley always answers the same thing. "We named you that for someone very special, who is no longer with us, but who loves you very much, even if you can't see her." It is not a lie, but it is not the whole truth either. Ashley has chosen to protect Helen from the knowledge that her grandmother is alive, but absent by her own choice. Maybe it is the right decision. Helen is too young to understand the complexities of family conflicts. Maybe when she grows up, Ashley will tell her the complete story, and Helen will be able to decide for herself if she wants to meet the grandmother who bears her name. I have kept all of Ashley's letters in a wooden box I bought, especially for that. There are more than 50 letters she has written during these years. At first, full of desperate regret, later with more mature reflections on motherhood and life. And in the last 2 years, calmer letters, where she tells me about Helen, about her daily routines, about the books she is reading. I have never answered any, but I have kept them all. Maybe one day Helen will want to read them to understand the story of her mother and her grandmother. The ladies of the knitting group have become my chosen family. Mrs. Susan turned 80 last month, and we organized a beautiful party in Connie's patio. Mrs. Renee is learning to use a tablet to watch videos of her grandchildren living in California. Mrs. Letty started giving traditional cooking classes to young people who want to learn their grandmother's recipes. We have all found ways to be useful and happy in this stage of our lives. We have all learned that old age is not just waiting for others to take care of us, but continuing to grow and contributing to the world in new ways. During the afternoons when the day's work is finished, I sit on my patio with a book or my knitting and reflect on the life I have built. It is not the life I planned when I was a young, single mother working day and night to raise Ashley. It does not include the family Sundays I dreamed of, nor the grandchildren's birthdays, nor the Christmas traditions I imagined we would share when I was a doting grandmother. But it is a dignified, quiet life, full of small daily joys and genuine relationships based on mutual respect. Sometimes, very few times, I wonder what would have happened if Ashley had made different decisions at her wedding, if she had chosen love and respect over social appearances. But those reflections do not last long. I have learned that it is no use living in the realm of what if. Real life is built with the decisions we actually take, not with the ones we should have taken. Helen is growing up healthy and happy, according to what Linda tells me. Ashley has become a dedicated mother who values every moment with her daughter, who never takes for granted the privilege of raising her, who now understands the weight and blessing of being responsible for another life. In a way, the lessons Ashley needed to learn were learned, although the cost was very high for everyone. Linda tells me that Ashley no longer asks for me, like before, that she seems to have accepted that this separation is permanent. I think that is the most mature thing she has done. Understanding that some consequences cannot be reversed, that genuine respect sometimes means accepting others' decisions even if they hurt us. On the starry nights of Chicago, when the air is fresh and my garden gives off the scent of the gardenias I planted the first year, I feel a deep peace in my heart. It is not the explosive happiness of extraordinary moments, but the serene satisfaction of having made the right decisions to protect my dignity and my well-being. I have learned that self-love is not selfishness. It is the necessary foundation to love others in a healthy way. Sometimes the greatest fresh start is the silence one chooses to keep.